So, this is the first iconic movie that made Jim Carrey the superstar and brought him his first $1 million. Breathtaking VFX made by the Light and Magic studio just blow everyone's minds. And this movie get an Oscar for the best makeup, and it is indeed the best. So let's try to touch a bit of this incredible movie history and create the mask in Blender from the movie The Mask. And as usual, let's start from the references. As you know, I'm using PureRef, as actually everyone is using PureRef. And let's make it a bit more comfortable, go to the reference tab and make your images 50% more transparent, so we will see what's going on in the background. Let's start with the plane surface. Align references and the plane and we are good to go. Here we will use mirror modifier. It's a bit more efficient and fast because we will need to do only one part of the mask. Let's subdivide our plane to have a bit more topology there, and now let's use proportional editing to move parts and bend our mask a bit. And actually you can ask me, ain't it the same thing as we can do with the grab brush in the sculpting? And you will be fully correct. It's just sometimes easier not to switch to sculpting and do some small improvements inside editing mode. But if you prefer to make it in sculpting, please be my guest. Just remember, now we are only blocking, that's why topology accuracy doesn't really matter on this step. Enjoy the chaos for now. For the eyes, nose and mouth, we will use knife. It's just easier and faster. Do not care about topology for now as well, just match the proportions. For the nose, simply select the polygons of the nose, actually, and you can simply extrude it, the simplest move ever. With the eye parts, simply move them inside a bit. Do not hurry, take your time and make it as good as you can. Do not compromise yourself and improving all until you will like it. Because blocking is the fundament. The better you will make it, the easier all other steps will be. But again, at the same time, do not dive into the details yet. We have another stage for it. The next stage is sculpting. So for sculpting, actually all we need is a solid amount of polygons. Let's add subdivision surface modifier. As you can see, geometry doesn't hold up. It's because we didn't prepare it for such. And the one who will save the day is bevel modifier. One thing is that the bevel modifier should be before the subdivision surface modifier. It will add extra loops on the desired edges. We have many good controls actually on this modifier, but 30% angle will work perfectly fine for us this time. Now as you can see, our mask is holding the form that we made previously. All we need to do is actually apply all the modifiers and remesh our mask. So to make it a bit more visually pleasant, you can press Shift R and slide mouse to increase or decrease the amount. This way you can actually see the amount of remeshed polygons that will be added. Keep in mind that you do not need to go crazy with it. You need solid and reasonable amount of polys. If the voxel remesher fail, and honestly it can fail actually, you can always use quad. That's a bit slower, but will do what you need. We can also actually now add the thickness with the solidify modifier. Don't forget to apply it as well before going to the sculpting. If you will have any strange areas, you can always smooth them and also remesh a couple of times. In these moments, just be creative actually, and if you see something that doesn't look right and you want to fix it, fix it. Simply try different methods, different modifiers, and I'm more than sure you will get what you need. But in this tutorial we are good with what we have, so let's move forward. So let's start with the proportions. Start by refining big shapes and then slowly move to the middle and small details. Match proportions, move parts like you need, separate them by the masks. If you start to lose the grip and your eyes is blurred, just leave it and return after the couple of hours or even the night. You will see many things to improve. But also do not be too precise. Done is better than perfect. It's a really good point, believe me. And now let's move to retopology. Before starting it, let's clean up our mess and structure all with the collections and proper names. Every retopology starts with the polygon, means plane surface. To make it more visible, let's change the view to the random. And now simply scale our plane surface and move it closer to the surface. And now we need to add shrink wrap modifier. This one will make sure that we are as close as possible to the surface. And now we are entering the process that someone can say boring, someone can say interesting. I would say it's meditative. All you need actually here is polybuild and 3 main rules of retopology. I will repeat these rules again, but how to use them and for more details you can go to the previous video where we did the scream mask. So long story short, rule number 1. Create loops around the important areas like eyes, mouth, nose, ears and face. But make sure they're connected without triangles or you will be in trouble. Rule number 2. Avoid triangles. And rule number 4. Avoid poles. This is the connection of more than 4 edges in one vertex. This will simply ruin your loops in the future, so you should avoid them. So using these rules, we are creating our basic loops and continue to assemble this puzzle. When the topology is done, we can add the thickness with Solidify, as previously. But be careful because sometimes Solidify can give you strange result. 3D is not linear and sometimes some improvements needed to work it like you want. Before going to detail stage, we need to check if our topology holds the subdivisions. We can simply add multi-resolution modifier and see where we need to add extra loops. And you can ask me, what are in the hell holding the form? Holding the form means that your volume of the form doesn't change with the subdivisions. If it is indeed changes, then you need to add a couple of extra loops. And I came up that the bevel modifier will do it better, and it helped me to do what I really want. I just selected the edges that needed to be beveled and add mean bevel weight, and changed limit method to weight. And that's exactly what we wanted, and it works perfectly fine. And now we are ready to go to the details. This is fun part. This is details. Let's add multi-resolution at first. We have here front and back side of the model that will have a bit different patterns and details. To prevent painting on both sides, we need to turn on front face only option in the brush menu. And this time I use the texture of the wood from the internet, a link will be in the description. I changed brush settings to stencil. Here is the bit tricky part because the navigation in the stencil is a bit weird, but it's acceptable, let's say it like this. You can scale up and down texture by shift plus right mouse button, rotate, Ctrl plus right mouse button and move just right mouse button. That's a bit tricky, I know, but we can work with that. And you can also control strength to make your texture more appealing. All is left now to implement it to the desired parts. Of course you can use multiple textures to make your surface more interesting. Just don't go too crazy with it because you can get the moment where your model will be over detailed and it will look too CGI, you know? That's what we want to avoid, of course. And to avoid it, just look at your reference, easy as that. And now I want to add some extra details, and for this I'm using Draw Sharp brush, but you can use any, of course, you like. Idea here just to add some final touches and to add some refine to the unique parts. Now let's touch a bit polygroups. It's a groups that you can create by selections that will help you to separate desired pieces. So for me the easiest way to make them is to turn off first of all the multi-resolution and then to select the parts that you need in the edit mode, not in the sculpting. And after it you can go to the sculpting, select create polygroups from selection. For me the easiest way. And you can see that I have now different and separated polygroups. What is that and why I created it? Because I have the inner part and the outer part that will have different materials, and also I have the borders. And now I can tell my brush to influence exactly this polygroup and not influence other. That's really smart and efficient. After polygroups made, I can proceed with refine my mesh, smooth out things as well as fixing them, because you know there's always something to fix. To be honest, the nose part gave me the most hard times, as you can actually see. But in the end I've made it, and I applied another wood texture to the inside of the mask. I've also created another polygroup for the nose part because it should be metallic in the outer part, so means that I need to use a bit another texture for it. So with this nose polygroup I've separated the nose and I also refined it a bit, smoothed out a bit and give it a bit more metallic feel. And then with the mask brush, I've started to create these circles. So it's actually easy peasy. You create the circles and then you make them rise up with the bulb brush. But again, you can do it with any brush. I thought that it's just like a cool place, to show how the bulb brushes also can be used, because not many people are using them at all. And add in a bit of details and imperfections for more realistic look. The logo, as you see, was made with exactly the same way. Mask, inflate, mask again, invert, deflate, etc. The process is fairly simple and clear. And now let's jump to the UVs. So, you know how I like UV step. It's pure meditation. You can try Smart UV project, but I went with old make sim way, as I need to have the control over the parts that I want to be unwrapped. So I need at least 3 parts: front, back, and the nose. This is where I did the seams. Then select all and press unwrap. So now, after you are happy with your unwrap, please do align rotation option to make your UV island facing correct direction. So this time I will go with the UDIM approach. What does it mean? It means that I will use not only one UV square but multiple to add a bit more resolution to my textures. There are multiple ways to add the UDIMs in Blender, but I'm using, I think, not the most efficient way, but I think, in my opinion, it's the most clear to the viewer. So to add the UDIMs, you need to first add the texture. Then in the image tab, press plus and add second UDIM. This way we already have 2 UDIMs. And this way they are ready to be filled with the islands. And yes, the amount of the UDIMs can be almost infinite, but think about this in another way. The more UDIMs you will have, the more textures you will have, the more memory you will need to spend to render your image. So this means that not every even PC can handle it. So be a bit mindful here. Always check the texel density. If to be simple here, all of your UV islands has to have the same resolution as the others, like plus minus. You can add the checker texture to make sure that all the squares of the whole model is the same. If, for example, one of your part has the squares a bit bigger or a bit smaller, it's not a problem. You need to select this part in the UV editor or in the viewport actually, and then in the UV editor you need to scale up or down your part so to match the square size of the other parts. If you will skip that part, then you can end up with that some parts will have more resolution and some parts will be like washed out. And after all parts in the UV are done, we can go to the texturing. So I have 2 options in this video. One is procedural in Blender and the second one substance. I will now continue with the substance as it's more flexible, but if you're interested in how to make it procedurally, you can see it in the end of the video. Before going to the substance, I will bake displacement map. I will do it to see my materials in substance with all the details I have, but you can ignore it if you want actually. How to bake the displacement map I've described in the latest video in the Scream mask creation, so please take a look. So when our displacement map is ready, let's jump to the substance. So to make it work good in the substance, we need the mid poly version of our mask and also the high poly version with all the details we made. In Substance Painter, create the new project and load our mid poly. Also check UV tile workflow. It's crucial to Substance, then it will understand that we are using the UDIMs. I also added my displacement under the Import Baked Maps menu to have them already in the project. After the model is uploaded to the viewport, now we need to bake the textures. This is almost always the first step to do in the Substance. By the way, baking map UV may be different because I'm using the old version of the Substance. Now it's a bit different, but the general idea and the general settings are the same. The only difference is that now you can actually see how the baking process is going and it's not freezing your PC. First of all, check the maps you need to bake. Then add the high poly model. Also, don't forget to choose the resolution of the textures. Just in case, 8K is extremely high resolution, so if your system not really powerful, use 4K or even 2K and it also will be fine. Hit bake and go for a coffee as it could take a while to bake. While it's baking, let's have a talk of why in the hell you need those maps. The answer is pretty simple. All of them are needed mostly for the masks. For example, cavity and ambient occlusion can give you dirt effect that we all like. And the most obvious, to bake the normal map, so in the mid poly object you will have exactly the same details as your high poly object without using as much memory. So, long story short, you need to bake maps to help Substance give you better result and achieve greater materials. Okay, now all the maps are baked and let's do our materials. In most of the cases, as a starting point, I use default materials in Substance. For this one, I simply search for the wood and choose wood chest stylized. Then I switch off all the layers inside, one by one. And the next step is to switch on again one by one, but to improve them till the result will be as I want. Do not shy to rotate, scale and use all the settings you want. Try and you will see that the result will come in straight to you. Also, if some of the layers I do not like, I simply switch them off or even delete. So I see here I have two colors blended, brown and green. So I duplicated brown layer and made it green. Simple, ain't it? Then I added the mask with a 3D Perlin noise. A bit of work with the settings and I have a perfect color blend for me. As you might see, the pattern is going wrong direction, we need it to be vertical. So actually go to the settings and simply rotate it to 90 degrees. You can also, of course, follow what I'm doing step by step, but also I recommend you to try things out. Do not afraid to ruin something, because you cannot do it, you always have Ctrl Z. For the inner part, we will simply copy our folder with the materials and paste it here. But I will slightly make it glossy, so it will be a bit different from the outer material, and also I will make it a bit more green. For the nose metal part, I'm doing exactly the same. Start with the standard material and improve it as you want it. When you are satisfied with the look and feel of materials, you can export it. It's an easiest step. Just make sure you selected the right export preset and it has everything you need. If not, you can duplicate it and improve it as you want. After all is set up, simply export textures. And before jumping into the Blender, you should understand that not everything can be described by the textures. The goal of Substance Painter is to give you just 2D texture. It can have or color or values that will help shader to show what you want. To reach the best result, you will need to work with the shaders and improve some of the parameters so your material in the end will look just incredible. Keep it in mind, because when I was learning 3D, no one did accent on the combination of the textures plus shaders. Okay, I hope this one is clear, and now let's jump to the Blender. So, shading. Let's put our UDIM textures to the shader editor. Add image texture and select all our UDIMs. And as my textures are 8K, for the purpose of saving memory and responsiveness of the viewport, I will turn on the simplify. I will decrease my viewport textures to 1K. That's how I'll have the responsive viewport, but the render will have 8K textures in the end. Now let's add all the other maps in the same order. Make sure that all the maps have non-color data enabled except the diffuse map. It should be RGB. Another thing to keep in mind, as the render engine in Substance and Blender are different, means materials can look a bit different, so use ramp to improve them. And if your viewport is still not responsive and freezes when you connect the textures, just go to the solid mode and link your texture like it, and when you are done, then go to the texture preview mode. When adding displacement, make sure you select displacement only in the material output settings of the shader. Then play a bit with the settings and it will be it. And now let's jump to the stage that can or improve or ruin everything you did. So for this one I wanted to make dramatic light, so I found a good starting reference. First I added the floor and camera to match my angle with the reference. Then I went to the Polyheaven and found good HDRIs to test them. Then I understood that I want some texture on the floor, and I went to Polyheaven once again and found pretty cool rock looking texture. And applied it with the displacement, and of course added a couple of subdivision to the floor so it will have enough geo to represent my details. Then of course camera work. It's a really significant step. Like if you add depth of field, it will give you like 1000 to the realism. But it's only one of the ways to make your camera pop up your image. So with the depth of field it's already looking cool, but still some improvements needed. So I added to the wall the same texture that it's on the floor. And I also let it up a bit to separate my mask from the background. Thanks to Gleb Alexandro compositing kit, I added some dust and flares to the scene. He described it really well in his video and I will put the link in the description in case you've missed it somehow. But before moving to the final render, do the test renders. Believe me, they are the best thing you can do because the test renders are giving you the option to see different angles and also to see the final quality if it's already there. After you are good with the test renders, you can set up the animation. In this case, it's simple spin. I always try to do spins through the controls. Controls are objects to which your mesh will be parented. And all the animation will be on these controls. It's a very handy workflow that allows you to manipulate control and leave your mesh without the keys. In most cases, the control can be empty object. I will add plain axis empty. Then you need to parent our mask to the empty. We need to add two keys actually for the spin in the Z axis. First is 0 degrees and the last frame would be 360. But to make your animation looped, you need to move your last key one frame forward. And after this one is finished, you can actually make the renders. After your sequence is rendered, you can go to the compositing stage. Do not skip compositing because it can reveal your image or your animation significantly. You can follow what I'm doing, but if to be short, I've added some gradients, I've added some vignette, I've added some glow, some aberrations and also some sharpness to give my mask a bit more look, and also of course some color correction. Nothing goes without the color correction. And your perfect mask is here. Please subscribe to the channel to see the new tutorials and see you online. Oh yeah, almost forgot. And here you can see now the texturing with the pure procedural Blender toolings. Enjoy!